Morning. Nice to see you all. I've been told I've got 12 to 15 minutes. The last time I had to do it in 12 minutes was my Nuffield talk. I needed to get kicked off after 12 minutes, but hopefully I'll try and fit it in as quickly as I can, but there's a lot to talk about, but hopefully a lot of it will come out in the questions at the end. But myself, I'm a farmer. That's my main job at home in Kent. I work with mum and dad, family farm. We're no-till, grow cover crops, wide range of crops, including intercrops, which I'll talk about. But what I will say is the intercropping is one tool we use in our system. It is a system, but cover cropping, no-till, something that we're learning about, but it is part of the system. And my overall aim is to reduce our inputs dramatically by using agroecological processes. And intercropping, hopefully, will be one good tool for that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is my trial that I did with Diversify this year, and I'm the only failure. I'll put it out there. I'm the only one that failed. As a guy, Gabe Brown, I saw in North Dakota, and he said, if you don't fail at something every year, you're not trying hard enough. So I was trying hard, but I failed. But this spring, well, for us, was horrendous. I think for most people, it was horrendous. Everything went in a month late. And once we did plant it at the end of April, we were then flooded. We had a rain event of 2 or 3 inches in a couple of hours, and everything was underwater. So it was a difficult year, and I'm not quite sure what we learned from this year, but I've learned probably what not to do. But the one I grew this year for the Diversify trial was spring beans and spring oilseed rape. Previous years I'd done spring peas and spring oilseed rape, but the fields that I was going to be planting on this year weren't suited to peas. So I'd do beans, I'd seen it done before somewhere else. And that was for disease control and just overall yield, really, was what I was hoping for. So I did six different plots with different seed rates of each and a control with a monoculture beans. And this kind of highlights the major starting issue. We did establishment counts, and as you can see, the spring oilseed rape, we didn't really see much of it. I don't know whether it was just the extreme wet, it just never really got going, and the ones that there never really were very vigorous. But the beans seem to love it. I think the next slide shows the establishment counts. So we only got sort of 17% establishment of our oilseed rape, which is a major issue. And I managed to get 102% establishment of beans. I don't know how that's possible. Magic beans. But the beans did very well, and the rape this year didn't. So that was a bit disappointing. Sort of May time, I was a bit down. I thought, oh God, this isn't going very well. And I had an Australian Nuffield scholar come and see me in about June time. We went and looked through the trials, and I started to get a bit more hopeful because we're looking at the crops and comparing the monoculture to the trial, and then we noticed that the one at the top that doesn't work very well. The one at the top, that's the intercrop bean, and that's the monocrop. And we noticed that there's about 50% more flour on the intercropped. Now this could be just down to seed rate, lower seed rate. I started to get excited that we might actually have a positive result. The unfortunate thing for this is after that we had 30 degrees for about 3 weeks during flowering, and most of that potential disappeared. Those pods didn't set. But then Katie and Charlotte came out, we did quadrat cuts in the field, and they took back and weighed and measured everything, and it came back saying that this middle one, which is an intercrop, was going to yield more than the other one. Thought, well, it's been successful, this is great. Then I went through the combine, and there was very little difference. So we had a yield meter on the combine, and actually the monoculture yielded more. So what do I learn from this year? Spring oilseed rape can be difficult to grow. I don't know, I will try it again. Whether I do this mixture, I'm not sure. But as you can see, I think, well, this demonstrates, I did it on another farm, another block of land, which is a more marginal block. I did beans and oilseed rape, and actually it worked reasonably well there. And down there, that was on quite sandy ground. That turned a negative margin for the beans into a positive margin with having the oilseed rape in. So it did work on another field, it just didn't work on the Diversify field, which isn't great. So other things I tried this year is undersowing spring oats with clover. I'll show you, I've done it previous years and it worked well. This year, for whatever reason, another complete failure. I trying to get clover established is something I haven't quite mastered yet. We're not quite sure why. I think we're part of the Diversify trial. We're hoping to sort of drill into why. I think there's a few things. There's slugs, there was the weather, drilling depth, and possibly being a conventional farmer, herbicide residue possibly is one reason. Some of the organic farmers in our group seem to get clover established pretty well, and we struggle, so maybe that is an issue that we have to look into. But one that did work, so I did have success this year. Unfortunately, it was only on 1/3 of a hectare. It was supposed to be 1/2 a hectare, but the other side of the field got flooded. But this was lentils with linseed. So I'm growing lentils for hodmedods, and this is the first year last year. And from my point of view, growing these niche crops are highly risky, so growing them by themselves is even more risky. So my idea with the intercropping is to add another crop in, and if the main crop fails or doesn't do very well, you've still got that intercrop to make up, so you still have some income. We know how to grow linseed, and we grow that on the farm, but we never grown lentils. Luckily that worked pretty well, and it's probably going to be our best gross margin on the farm, but unfortunately it was only 1/3 of a hectare. So that's what we did this last year. I should be saying last season now, shouldn't we, because it's 2019. So for this season, I'm going to just go through my plans. Firstly, an observation in our linseed by itself last year was we had a terrible issue with flax flea beetle eating the cotyledons that are coming through, a really difficult year. And what I noticed when I was walking across the field is that all the wild oat patches in the field, the linseed wasn't getting eaten by the flax flea beetle. So I started thinking, okay, something going on here. So I put it on Twitter, and it suddenly came back that in Canada they've done trials on oats mixed with oilseed rape for oilseed rape flea beetle, and it reduces attack. So it wasn't, by observation I realised that this is probably a good companion for linseed. So for this year, with all our linseed, I'll be planting spring oats with it. That'll hopefully mean I won't have any issues with flax flea beetle. And I will, as a conventional farmer, spray out the oats sort of when they're sort of after a few weeks, and it'll just go to linseed. I have grown linseed and oats together, but they're not very easy to separate, and the oats can suppress the linseed. And I'll be doing the linseed and lentils again on a bigger scale, and I'll be adding the oats into that mixture as well, because I did notice with the linseed, with the lentils, because there's a lower seed rate of linseed, that the flea beetle did have fewer plants to attack. So adding the oats into that mixture as well, and then taking the oats out. This is one I tried a couple of years ago and worked really well. This is spring beans with spring oats. There's a few reasons I was doing that. One is for weed control, so the spring oats will scavenge the free nitrogen from the soil, and that prevents certain weeds germinating, and also increase our yield. And also, I think it's touched on about disease. If you grow beans with a cereal, you get a reduction in chocolate spot as well. So there's lots of reasons why I want to grow this one. And spring oats are very hit and miss, really. As both spring oats and spring beans are very hit and miss. But I did this 2 years ago on a strip trial in the middle of a field, and this is a yield map of the field. And the bluer the colour, the better the yield. The redder the colour, the worse the yield. As you can see, my 2 tram lines through the middle of the field, that's where we had the spring beans and spring oats together, and we had a 15% higher yield. That's combined yield compared to beans by itself. I think I can get that easily up to 30% just by increasing the seed rate of the oats. I was a bit worried the oats were going to suppress the beans, but that wasn't really an issue. So that's one thing I'm going to do this year, hopefully get a 30% yield increase over conventional spring beans. I will try this one again, undersowing clover. How I'm going to do it, I haven't worked that one out yet. But the reason I'm going to try it again is because 2 years ago I did it and it was very successful. Again, it was a strip trial in the field. This is spring oats. If you look at this field, the left-hand side of the field is the best part, and the right-hand side of that field, the yield always goes down and down. Different soil type, it never yields as well. But I had two or three tram lines where I had undersown clover. And what I found with the combine, as soon as I turned into that two tram lines, the yield went up, and the consistency of the yield was the same. So you can see with that trial there, the yield stayed the same all the way across the field. And the only difference was clover undersown. And we actually found we had 3/4 tonne more hectare average yield from the oats mixed with the clover. So if I can master establishing clover, I know there's going to be some good benefits. And then that stayed in the wheat for the following year. The idea is eventually to have that clover in the bottom for 3 or 4 years permanently. So this will be this autumn. Another observation this year, where I grew the lentils as a trial, we actually found them growing with the wheat. Winter wheat being our main crop, half the farm would be into winter wheat probably. I've been looking for a companion for winter wheat, not easy. We have some black art grass issues, so we do use herbicides. But I found that the volunteer lentils had grown through all the herbicide and were quite happily growing with the wheat. So that's made me think maybe I should be trying to grow a companion of lentils with my wheat, get the benefits of a little bit of nitrogen, just the diversity, BYDV, all those different things we have issues with, and then in the spring the lentils won't be there. And I'll probably mix that with buckwheat as well. And I will be doing the peas and the oilseed rape again, which I did 2 years ago. The main idea of that is the peas, anyone who's grown peas, is that they end up on the floor at harvest and trying to drag them up with a combine. And the oilseed rape, you use that as a trellis to hold them off the ground. And it worked well for us, not harvest, just go on the harvest before. Our peas were about that far off the ground, and I managed to combine them. Other people in the area, they were dragging them off the floor, and it was a real disaster. So I will be doing that again. There's some good contracts for peas as well. So this is why I'm thinking of intercropping. It's finding a crop and what's the issue with that crop. So peas, the issue is standing power, and finding a companion to go with it to negate that issue. So that you're trying to lower your risk. That's the way I've started to think about intercropping. And that is me.